GST Council approving the broad tax structure.
Right.
The tax structure is going to be 0,
Correct.
5, not 6,
Absolutely right.
12, 18,
Right.
and not 26, 28.
8%, absolutely.
But after long discussion, there was not sufficient support for 40%.
Absolutely.
Kerala was the only state that demanded 40%.
Well, it's been acknowledged well by the finance minister in his speech right now.
The reason we push for 40% is that there are a number of commodities which suffer more than 40% tax. Why should we reduce the tax on them? They won't pass it on to consumers. And less the tax on luxuries and higher ended commodities. Higher would have to be the tax on necessities. But the logic of the Union Finance Minister was that huge compensation will have to be paid, and therefore those commodities like tobacco products, aerated drinks, luxury cars, that today suffer more than 40% tax. There would be a central cess, so that total incidence on these commodities don't come down.
I just want to ask you about this specific point. So, you've got all these commodity aerated drinks, big cars, tobacco products. Do you expect the overall incidence, tax plus cess to remain the same, or will it go up?
Tax plus cess would remain, tax incidence would remain the same. So overall tax incidence as in the past. So the central government expects to mobilize something like 50,000 crores of rupees, which they feel would be required for compensation. And most states, having been assured of 14% per annum growth in the next 5 years, which is to be fully compensated by center, thought it not a worth point to fight about.
So it's a good deal which the centre appears to have given you on the whole, sir.
The center has also promised that this situation will be reviewed every year, and there will be a closure date. On the 5th year, the cess will be removed, and GST Council can decide whether there should be a 40% tax rate or something else.
So I just want to ask you to one point which has possibly not been discussed as much. We've been discussing most things around goods. Let me just ask you about services. What's the broad understanding? Will most services come in the 18% slot? How will services be treated?
Services will come in the 12 and 18.
Correct.
They are the standard rate. In fact, services won't go beyond 18.
Absolutely.
So the services will be distributed between 12 and 18.
Right.
And the Secretary's Committee would be making the draft report on this.
Right. So at this point, so there's not a lot of clarity on which services will go into what. How quickly do you expect to?
Absolutely no clarity.
Right.
We have not discussed it now. But now having decided upon the broad tax structure, 0, 5, 12, 18, 28. Now all the commodities and services will be individually evaluated
Correct.
and would be put into one of the tax rates.
Right.
Most important factor being looking at the overall tax incidence today.
Correct. So how quickly do you hope to finish this draft? Would this also be important for the GST
We
laws?
will have to do it very quickly
Absolutely.
because this month itself all this have to be done. So tomorrow, once we decide upon how the tax is to be administered, what will be the role of central government, what is the role of state government, then the officials will be sitting down for a number of days.
Two things I want to ask you, sir, specifically at this point. You've got the question of services. You're saying, of course, all of these will have to be set out by the officials. I just want to bring your attention to the whole discussion around services. And you'll obviously be discussing dual control tomorrow, but at this point, sir, do we stand by the earlier understanding that services will continue to be administered by the centre, or is that's not something you have a different view on?
Today, the centre has had its way, but tomorrow, I don't think any of the state would be willing to compromise the demand that below 1.5 crores turnover both in goods and services, should be entirely the domain of the states. And above 1.5 crore, it will be jointly administered by center and state, modalities of which would have to be determined later.
So, at this point, then, when the states are certainly sticking.
That is the next ticklish question. Once that is also determined, I think boards are clear for GST law to be introduced to the parliament.
Absolutely. So then I just have to ask, so first of all, on dual control, so the centre had made a draft, there was an idea to cross-empower the centre and the states. How do you feel about that at this point? Do you feel that's a workable idea?
The centre's position was the entire service tax would be administered by them. That is not acceptable. Will never be accepted.
Right.
But then how cross-empowerment has got to be?
Right.
Well, it depends. Census says that you select a 5% sample.
Right.
Depending upon risk factors, is allotted to center and state,
Right.
who would do the auditing and so on.
Absolutely.
Well, something of this arrangement has to go to come, but states are going to demand, and center may also do. Outside this 5% or 10%, the states should have freedom to look into the accounts of anybody.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.